I've been told 10 minutes, so. And I'm also wondering what's for lunch, so. Can I get the slides? Yeah. All right. So I think a lot of what I was going to talk about actually has been covered in various facets and different pieces. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack. One, I think the topic that I was going to talk about was really around what is required from an ecosystem perspective. I'll touch upon that a little bit, and after that, I will really talk about how we, this is SAP, as a software company is trying to adapt to what the Internet of Things brings to the table. Because I think, a little bit in terms of what the business is, a little bit in terms of what we need to do internally to gear up for this revolution. It is a revolution, let's all believe that. So first of all, I think I wanted to take an example of Tesla. So just put a connected car in there. For example, what Tesla is trying to do is they're trying to build electric cars. Take any of our electric car ecosystems here. You need essentially the government to actually provide subsidies because they are expensive. The battery systems that actually go into cars have to be available at a cost point that is affordable for a lot of people. Secondly, what's needed is you really need these charging stations. You're going to have an ecosystem of people who come to the table to be able to provide that capability for cars to flourish. And even beyond that, Tesla is nothing but it's a moving computer in a lot of ways. Everything is automated, everything is software driven, and I think what needs to happen is there are multiple players, sensor manufacturers. There are going to be software players that come to play there. And they're already working with Apple at some level in trying to figure out what kind of collaboration can happen. So really, any kind of IoT system that you're trying to build requires a whole host of people to come to the party. And if you're not going to have that, and I think this whole endeavor is going to fail. Okay? And I think one of the most important players that we should absolutely never forget is government and government regulation. Because this ecosystem to flourish, I love the Make in India initiative. If we really want to have India to be a player in the IoT ecosystem and the world, I think it's important for us to start doing our way. Things are different in India. The way we actually do manufacturing, the way we have automobiles out there, everything needs to be in some way or form, it needs to be local in flavor, local in the way we operate. So I think the importance of an ecosystem cannot be understated, or absolutely it's something that needs to happen. Another thing I want to just bring to the table from an IoT standpoint, if you look at Apple, so what Apple has done is, do you know who manufactures the phones? We don't. Some of them are done, but essentially there are a whole host of people that actually manufacture iPhones. Okay? We've got people in China, we've got people in Taiwan, there are a bunch of people that are actually doing this. But the brand that actually flourishes is the Apple brand. The rest of it is actually commoditized. Now what IoT is getting to a point is that, is this going to happen to automobiles now? Is Apple going to be the car manufacturer of the future? I know there are a lot of automobile folks here, but that's what we need to start thinking about. We're talking about IoT in terms of business model transformations. And what is happening is, with the entire social media coming to the table, and then what happened with the Ubers, what happened with the Airbnbs of the world, is starting to happen in manufacturing. Now, can we look at business model transformations? I'll give you one example that I want to talk about, and that is, take the textile industry as an example. So textiles can now be 3D printed. There are designers who actually want to be able to put out their designs. They may or may not belong to larger textile manufacturing companies. So if we built an ecosystem using this connected world, or the Internet of Everything, as Cisco states about it, is, can a designer actually put a design out there? Can there be an individual that can go on to some kind of social infrastructure, pick a design, pick materials, and then get it printed in your local print zone? We're talking about customized clothing manufacture. Harley-Davidson is already trying to do what we're talking about in clothing with motorbikes. So we're working with Harley-Davidson actually currently in terms of customized motorbikes that need to be built. There are about 180 different variants in every Harley-Davidson bike that actually goes out. So how are the manufacturing lines going to cater to this form of customization? Can you pick and choose features? Can you pick and choose things that you want? And can you actually have a manufacturing line churn that out? So we've actually been able to reduce the manufacturing end-to-end timeline by a huge extent because we're using the Internet of Things. So these are business process transformations that are already happening today. There are some very interesting things that everybody talks about predictive maintenance, that whole movement from CapEx to OpEx. So we are working with a few companies. One of them happens to be a company called Kaiser Compressors. And what Kaiser is trying to do is they currently sell air compressors, high in terms of expenditure to set it up for an industrial plant. Now what is happening is they've been able to equip all of their machines with sensors. They're able to predict the cost of maintenance, and now they're actually going to market with selling compressed air. Okay, so they've changed the complete model from actually a CapEx intensive approach to something that is more OpEx approach. But here is a very, very interesting example of a partner that we're working with, which is doing it in India. So we have a company that actually makes these water filters that you have in all of our houses, right? So what they've done is they've actually put a simple flywheel in there in the water filter. They've got a magnetometer that cuts off the water flow beyond a certain point. They do not want to sell water filters anymore. They want to give it to you for free. And what they want to do is, starting in a few months from now, you actually will have water filters you can just procure and then pay based on the usage of filtered water that you're going to be using. Very simple use case. But the fact that you're able to put some devices into that particular machine and have that connectivity to some cloud-based network that monitors what the consumption patterns are is changing the way we will be using filtered water. This is a social transformation in India because a lot of people in India do not have access to clean water. If you're able to do this and actually change the number of people who can get access to water of that nature, it's going to be a phenomenal change. So we're not talking about just large industrial situations and large industrial parameters and changes in production patterns, but even small changes are happening today with the Internet of Things. Now, not that the large ones are not important. I will give you one example of an industrial scenario that we're working with, and I think we're co-working with Siemens as well on this, which is fundamentally we're creating what is called an asset intelligence network. So we really want to connect assets together. So if you talk about manufacturers who produce machines, could be motors, could be turbines, could be anything. The biggest problem that manufacturers have is it's not possible for them to monitor the operating condition of these machines. There is no way for a manufacturer to know how it's being used. Has it been installed right? Is it basically conforming to what the parameters of operation that were prescribed? So what is happening is we're basically saying we will create a network where there will be operating parameters in a customer's site that will be captured into what we call a massive network. And this massive network will have an access for the manufacturer. We're talking about Venn diagrams which say, if manufacturer A produced this machine and customer B actually uses the machine, both of them will have access to the data. So you have fingerprints. You have actually machine fingerprints that are tested in labs saying, this is the operating condition this is calibrated for. Now, at the site of the customer, you can actually push that information over. You have sensors that monitor it. You have vibration sensors, temperature monitors, whatever else you have. And that fingerprint is uploaded again. So what happens is there is real-time matching of operating conditions versus standard operating procedures under which it should be running. So we're talking about corrective measures that can be taken. We're talking about preventive maintenance that can be done. And further to that, if there is a problem, we're also linking it to what we have in terms of a vendor network. We have what is called the Ariba network, which is essentially a large vendor network that we have. You have spare parts that are needed right from this requirement analysis that is done, enabled by IoT. You can actually put in a request for parts. So then we're talking about, we have another network which is essentially called the field glass network. It's basically procurement of services. So field glass is nothing but it's a product that we have which essentially brings together vendors who provide people services. Okay? So you have a service request for a particular machine identified by, because you have this IoT link that you're establishing, you can put in a field glass request. You can have a service technician come to your place with essentially the parts that are needed. So we're talking about building a network of networks, which will be what the future will really come from. I mean, we had connected machines. A lot of people talked about the fact that we have connected machines. We've had it for 30 years. We've had SCADA-enabled machines for what? Long time. But it is this network effect that is going to give us what the future is going to hold for us. And that basically are the kind of use cases that the Internet of Things will enable. And social media did this. Facebook connected us as people. The entire concept of everything else we're doing with machine-to-machine connectivity will bring in a similar revolution, which is far beyond what we saw with people-to-people connectivity. And for paucity of time, I will stop here. I'll open it up for any questions you guys might have. I just wanted to talk about the business cases. Just one more point I want to make is, as a software company, we were focusing on hiring computer science engineers in the past. And that was the core focus of everything we did. You know what? Computer science engineers, paradigms that they needed to understand to come to play with us. Now, the kind of people we need are very, very different. We need mechanical engineers. We actually need electronics engineers. We need data scientists. We need people who can look at business process transformations. And those skill sets that we are actually looking for and the kind of people we want to come and change this landscape are very different from what we used to look at in the past. So we're talking about multidimensional people, people who can try and apply their technical knowledge that they've gained to business transformation scenarios. So I think this is important for all of us. I think every single industry, before we used to say every industry is an IT industry, but I think it's going both ways now. Every IT industry is also something else. It's probably a manufacturing setup. So we're talking about intermingling of different industry requirements and necessities, and it's a connected world. It's everything coming into one paradigm of operation to change business models. And believe me, I think the world of the future is going to be very different from what we see today. Thank you. I can answer any questions. Lunch it is then. Thank you.
No, thank you.